Mr. Engel raises the issue, Dr. Shaw, of flexibility in this. Maybe you could give us an example of when you were director and how, in a given situation, a little more flexibility would have gone a long way in terms of responding.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would note what David said. In Syria and in neighboring countries, you had a lot of Syrian refugees leaving Syria, going into Jordan and Lebanon. And they're not living in camps. They're living in neighborhoods and communities. And in that context, physically finding them inside of apartment buildings and in low-income housing situations and taking to them food or having them come with some special designation to pick up American food is both deeply inefficient, upsetting to everybody else in the neighborhood, and difficult for local businesses that are, dependent on the local food economy. So with the World Food Program, we work to let them use, not through Food for Peace, but other programs, vouchers that would go to those households. And I met with mothers and children, but the mothers would say, these vouchers, which say, from the American people, they have the USAID logo on them, they say, these are saving our lives right now. I don't know where my husband is. He may have perished in the fighting inside of Syria, but my 4 children and I are sustained here because we can take these vouchers to local stores. And by the way, the local merchants and local communities are less upset about the big influx of refugees because they're contributing now to the local economy. The fact that we've run out of money, basically, for this kind of approach and are now stuck with just commodity food is why you're hearing about the cuts that David highlighted. And to me, this is a national security issue. This is the heart of where refugees are pouring from this region into the rest of Europe and elsewhere, causing real instability. So we are undermining our own capacity to do what we know is right and has worked because we don't have the flexibility.
Let me ask Secretary Glickman, because Dr. Barrett, in his testimony, said Canada uses a different approach and gets roughly twice the benefit in terms of the amount of food aid on the ground in these situations. You noted the GAO study that says that shipping food from the U.S. to sub-Saharan Africa took 100 days, on average, longer than procuring food from regional sources in cases of emergency and such. So we're not the only ones providing food aid around the world. Maybe you could share with us how other top donors like Europe and Canada and Japan structure their food aid.
Nobody structures their food aid exactly like we do, that's for sure. And but in history, I remember looking at magazines like Time Magazine and others, and we advertised that all of this overseas food were American grain going in American bags. And, I remember as a kid seeing all of that. You all probably do too as well. And so the impression is that these were important humanitarian products that were moving from a farm in Texas or Oklahoma or Kansas or Ohio or wherever directly to people overseas. And I think that has had an impact politically, accompanied by the cargo preference thing, to a kind of resistance of wanting to make the programs more flexible. It's almost become ideological or religious in some circles, that this is kind of part of the history. But other countries, Canada is a huge producer of commodities, wheat, corn, cotton, wheat and corn, not so much cotton, but grain, sorghum, some soybeans, and then legumes and pulse crops and everything else. And they've just got a more flexible way of dealing with the problem. They can get their crops there faster. But we still provide half the food aid in the world, roughly, the United States of America.
You mentioned also, and maybe I'll go to Dr. Barrett for this, the cargo preference vessels being a factor in this. And Dr. Barrett, what is the setup of these corporations? You mentioned that they're not American-owned, so how are they able to take advantage of U.S. law in this respect, and how does that figure in the calculus here?
Mr. Chairman, the law requires that the vessels fly a U.S. flag and follow all U.S. laws and regulations. They don't require that the ultimate equity holders be American. And so foreign corporations, 3 in particular, own 45% of the U.S. agricultural cargo preference fleet. Foreign corporations can set up U.S. subsidiaries, purchase a vessel, flag it with a U.S. flag, follow all U.S. law, but the profits reaped by those vessels accrue to the subsidiary and pass right on through to the foreign corporation that ultimately holds the subsidiary.
I see. My time's expired. I need to go to Mr. Engel for his questions.